Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am the Diggly Doodah Doc. As always, I am joined by my comrade in arms, always ready to defend the castle of the Niche Cache, El Wild Cardo. And we are here to talk Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode Dos. Highly Espanol tinge to the start of this episode, as you may be able to understand. You can support the Niche Cache via Patreon. This is the best way to support the Niche Cache, so jump on Patreon. If you do like what we're doing, writing things, talking about things, broadcasting things, however you like the Niche Cache. If you do like the Niche Cache, it would mean a lot to us if you could support us on Patreon. So just jump on Patreon, our Niche Cache on Patreon. The link is everywhere and you'll find us and you can support us. And we have the wildcard on the other end of the line. Wildcard, how's it going?
Yeah, mate, not too bad. Not too bad. Still probably haven't caught up the caught up the sleep from that sleepless night on Monday after watching that Game of Thrones episode. Left me just in a bit of a state. I wasn't really sure what to do.
Why?
It's just a mess of emotions, mate. There's a bit of tragedy going on, quite a lot of poignancy, even a little bit of romance in there, and then above all, you had old wild man Tormund, the Giantsbane, just coming in and dropping classic one-liners and gags the whole way through, making me laugh through it all. And it's a bit of a, you don't normally get that many swings and that many peaks and valleys in one episode of television.
I was curious to see where I'd want to start this discussion, but the best place is probably old Tormund right there, and this may allude into a next point that I want to raise about a couple of characters not going full circle, but more getting a whole lot deeper into their hero's journey type of thing. And that is the synchronicity of my life, because a couple of days ago I was listening to a podcast to do with, I can't really remember, but at some point in the podcast they were talking about milk and how milk was initially used as something to get young herbivores or young mammals who can't go out and kill and defend themselves. It was used to get them to grow quickly so that they could defend themselves in the primal world of Mother Nature. So if you're a cow or a goat, whatever you are that produces milk, obviously a whole lot more animals produce milk. I'm very sorry to stereotype the milk producers out in the animal kingdom there, but if you're any animal that produces milk, you're feeding your young ones milk so that they can grow really fast and be really strong really quickly so that they can then defend themselves. Because there's probably another creature that is preying on the young. And so for humans to drink animal milk is a bit weird. Because we're drinking a product of, obviously milk is all bullshit now and it's not real milk. It's all been, changed and enhanced or fucked up, however you want to view it. But the idea of drinking cow's milk as another animal that produces milk to help their young ones grow, and us humans are drinking that milk to have that effect, it not only made a lot of sense in my mind because, people who drink a lot of milk tend to get really big and strong. It's also ridiculously weird, and I don't really drink a whole lot of milk, so I'm not too worried about that. I don't really want to drink milk that's been designed for a young cow to grow and become a big cow really fast. And then we had Mr. Giantsbane himself offering the exact same insight. He drank milk from a giant breast. And that's how he became a giant. It was a very weird moment of synchronicity in my mind about milk.
Did you know, Doc? Fun fact coming up right here. Did you know that supposedly humans are the only animal that can actually, drink and process milk from other animals? Like, you can't feed a cow human milk. It won't be able to, it'll just get sick. It won't be able to digest it. Humans, though, for some whatever reason, can actually digest milk from other animals, and they reckon it might be like an evolutionary type thing. Just because humans were dumb and just kept on drinking cow's milk and stuff like that, we've developed to where we can actually digest it now. And people who are lactose intolerant, often looked at as like this is a thing that is wrong with them, perhaps. But it's actually that they're the normal ones and everyone else has this mutation to where they're able to digest milk from other animals. There's your fun fact for the day.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
It does. It does make sense, because it is kind of weird, because it's like you literally do not see that happen with any other animal. It's kind of like a very deliberate thing. You also mentioned the thing about the hero's journey, right? For a lot of these characters, and that particular phrase. Do you know the Joseph Campbell thing about the monomyth, the hero's journey?
Yes.
Yeah, so good. I thought that must have been what you were sort of hinting at, because I've read quite a lot on that. I quite enjoy that whole I'll say what it is. Like, the monomyth is it is the hero's journey. It's the thing about that standard kind of character arc that you see in all mythologies. Like, mythologies long before people had connections with other languages and cultures and those kind of things. You see the same sort of myths. You see the same sort of myths in general popping up all around the world. There's something sort of deeper and more human about them. It's what they're there for. It's like a mirror into something beyond individuals. And the monomyth is, think like King Arthur, think like Luke Skywalker is probably one of the most obvious examples of it. And I think there's 12 steps to it. You start off with the call to adventure, which is the old someone tells you that you've got to do something, and you realize okay, I've got an adventure to whatever. Supernatural aid, you get some kind of this is like King Arthur being told by Merlin, here you go, I'm going to give you a bit of a skill set, a bit of wisdom or whatever that'll help you go along. Then you come up to the first threshold where there's some kind of task they have to overcome, some kind of obstacle in their way. Along the way they stumble into help and mentorship and stuff, and then there's the old challenges and temptations phase, and you come into the abyss, which is the death and rebirth phase. If you're looking at Jon Snow in particular, whose hero's journey is a pretty significant one, you can look at his call to adventure as going to the wall, supernatural aid from some of those fellas at the Night's Watch, but also eventually later on, this is one of probably a later step for him, but he got his literal supernatural aid from his uncle at one point. The death and rebirth phase done. Transformation, when you come back after that as a transformed person, makes sense. Atonement, make up for the stuff you did wrong earlier. And then the gift of the goddess, which is some kind of thing where I guess maybe in Jon Snow you could say that is that of when he got resurrected, but and then the old return home, and it's like a little circular thing where you come back where you started, you end up changed. Where are we right now? We're in Winterfell, which is exactly where the show started. Every one of these major characters probably has a little bit of monomyth about them, but I think even the show itself on an overall scale has this too, where we've been through different twists and turns, and we've had some red herrings along the way, and we've had to overcome some stuff to get to where we are, and now we're in Winterfell, exactly where the show began, but completely changed because here comes the big story. Here comes the big one where the undead march upon the doors.
I'm sure everyone's very thankful that you have broken it down. It's a beautiful thing. It's
important mythology.
So you applied that to Jon Snow. You applied it to the bigger overarching story, and you also hinted that it can be applied to a lot of characters in Game of Thrones. There was 3 characters in this episode 2, that really caught my eye, and they were Tyrion and Jaime Lannister, and then you had Theon as well, who has been on an absolute journey. Like Theon, far out, Brussels sprout. Theon has endured a fair amount of shit. So that got me thinking about like who do I resonate the most in that journey. To be fair, my personal journey in the real world hasn't quite been as bad as Theon's. So, like, Theon isn't realistic for me, thankfully.
You haven't had your knob chopped off, basically.
Or just an event like that. Just an event of that scale. I have had something chopped off, though, wildcard, because personally I resonate with Jaime's journey. This isn't like hard into the hero's journey or like for like Jaime Lannister, but it's just the more subtle nature of Jaime's journey, where we've seen his character develop and change over time. We've seen different layers of depth being shown. That's who I personally resonate, and I think personally I've just been through the period of Jaime being at King's Landing and I don't know if it's like mental torture of being with Cersei, but just that situation for Jaime recently, before he left King's Landing to go north with Cersei, that wasn't easy for Jaime. We can agree on that. So I feel like personally I'm Jaime Lannister, just heading off to Winterfell. Heading off to make everything right, heading off to enjoy the fruits of all the hard work and just to put all that bullshit behind him,
I called it the redemption tour in the writing thing with Jaime, because he started off, he was, the superior knight. Everyone knew how great he was. One of the top like fellas in sword combat in the entire land. He's part of the King's Guard. He's part of he's sleeping with his sister. He's a cocky old bastard. He pushes Bran out a window. And as the series goes on, you see him developing a conscience. Because even at the start, he had that thing hanging over him where he was the Kingslayer and he was the Oathbreaker. And in his mind, he did all that for the right reasons, but he had to live with that from a lot of people who didn't trust him fully from that, and so he could never quite be the superstar he always thought he was and wanted to be. And then as the seasons progressed, he's realized that that's not what he wants at all, and he's sort of gone about slowly, just developing this conscience and helping Brienne, and then he's seen Brienne, pay him back and potentially save his life at the start of the last episode. Pretty easy sway, actually. Brienne just steps up and says, nah, he's all good, don't worry. And Sansa says, oh, well, okay then, sweet as. And Dany's just left there fuming a little bit, as Dany so often has been in the last couple episodes, just simmering under the surface without letting it show, potentially because she keeps getting interrupted by people. That was the case in the last one anyway. I think Sansa's still quite interested in knowing what's going to happen to the North if they happen to defeat the White Walkers. But yeah, Jaime's just slowly gone about, and when he lost his hand, that was a symbolic moment, and it was a very much like a humbling for him, because he couldn't fight like he used to anymore, and so he had to reckon with, am I that person at all anymore? And he's not, is he? He's like, for all the characters in the show, you think there's a lot of people who've been through a lot of stuff, but he's potentially changed the most of anyone, just the development that he's been through. And it's not quite done yet, is it? The redemption tour's still got one or two little twists to go. I mean, they set it up to where maybe he sacrifices himself in the battlefield because that'll be the ultimate act of selflessness, and to come from being the most selfish person at the start, that would be potentially the closing of that arc, or the closing of that circle. But I also think they may be leaving it open for one last climactic, encounter. The devastating finale. Tyrion had it with his dad shooting him with a crossbow on the dunny. Potentially, Jaime's got that one last little scene to go with the reunion with Cersei, where he rejects her once and for all. Who knows?
And then that leads us to Jaime and Bran, who had their moment where I'm not sure if they both realized, but it was more a case of Bran pretty much telling him everything. Like, it's just the old adage: everything happens for a reason, and everything. The wheels were set in motion from that moment where Jaime pushed Bran out of the tower, and I think, as I alluded to last week, it's impossible for Bran to feel angry about that because it's led Bran directly to his destiny. It's led a lot of other characters. That moment has led a lot of other characters to their destiny as well. And for me, a lot of these moments are being like when Sam told Jon about his lineage, and those type of moments that we've got in the first 2 episodes. They've been very quick, they've been very rapid, so it just feels a bit weird to have such big moments like that with such minimal dialogue. Like, it just seems a bit weird, and that was one of the moments with Bran and Jaime where, well, that's the thing about having a show like this. Like, we could have sat there with those 2 characters for a good, 15 minutes, having a good old chinwag about everything. But it was condensed, and that's kind of what everything has been like so far in the first 2 episodes. It's been condensed. A lot of action in terms of characters reuniting, and just beautiful moments of our favourite characters being together. We haven't had a moment like this where all the people that we've come to know and appreciate or dislike or whatever, now they're all together. And one thing that I always think about is how I would be on that night before such a battle. And this battle has been compared to Helm's Deep for a couple of different reasons. But
I definitely got those vibes.
For me, it was... to be honest, I don't really watch a whole lot of battle-y kind of movies or TV shows, so I can only really refer to Lord of the Rings and Helm's Deep. But just that, the moments before, the night before, like, how would I be in that situation? Well, what would I be doing? And I'm probably going to be like that guy who talked to Davos, and he's like, I'm not a fighter. I don't know what to do. That would probably be me, because I'm a lover, not a fighter. But I think they put a different twist on all the characters coming together, whether it was the fireplace, whether it was Sansa and Daenerys having a little moment and then that moment being turned off very quickly, whether it was the Night's Watch guys coming together, the 3 Musketeers, and Sam, Jon, and what's his face?
Ed.
All those coming togethers, all those, like, the dialogue was quite nice. Like, it was fun to hear the back and forths of those characters, and because we've never really had too much of it. All these characters have been locked away on their own kind of stories, their own narrative journeys. But it all came together, but it came together with the pressure and the ultimatum that tomorrow was going to be an absolute shitstorm.
Yeah, I thought the first episode was really well done. I thought the second episode was absolutely brilliant, like as good as anything they've done in ages. And a lot of it was kind of like choppy, like they were... These interactions between the characters are just the best thing about the show, because you think about the what's at stake here. there are zombies, there are like ice zombies heading towards them, a mass of them, an inconceivably big army, and they're just gonna potentially kill everyone. Like it's not the most realistic scenario out there. It's very much in the realms of fantasy, right? But the way it's written and designed is not like you're not worrying about that because you're looking at the characters, and with believable characters you get away with any of that stuff because you make a believable world and you can do what you want in that world if the characters are realistic and whatever. And so just getting these interactions between the characters, all these different ones like bouncing back and forth, and we got like short little scenes where they were short little scenes, like we didn't even get the start of whatever Bran told Tyrion, but they tell you just enough, and it's not necessarily about plot, because plot with Game of Thrones has always been unpredictable, and a lot is left unsaid and to be followed sort of by the actions rather than the words as well. And so so much of the show, so much of the most important stuff in the show, there's even a bit from this latest episode that falls very much in this. It happened completely off screen and we've never seen it. Like Robert's Rebellion, I keep coming back to that because I think it's about the most important thing that's happened in this world, short of like whatever has been going on beyond the wall. And we don't see either of those two things. The Night's King and whatever have mostly been happening off screen. We've had a couple encounters, had a couple visions along the way, but most of it's not happening where we can see it. So just to get an episode like this where everything's happening, but it's happening in such a well-written way, where it's as much about what's unsaid as what is said, and you can see that it's super well acted too, across the board in this one. Just all these little interactions where everyone's got something they want or they need, or just something they're feeling that fear, and that's the whole thing. Is like you said, that like 24 hours to live thing was so strong, like such a fog hanging over everybody's thinking, and it's just like, how do you react in that situation? Who does what? And we saw these characters all doing like whatever was right for them in that moment, and it's got to be such a weird situation where like the waiting would be the tough thing, like going to actual battle, as frightening as that would be. Once you're in the battle, you're in the battle. You're just doing what you can until someone kills you or you kill them. And leading up to that, though, there's just nothing you can do. You're helpless, waiting. 6 hours. They're gonna be here. Well, what do I do now? I thought that was a superb episode of Game of Thrones. I thought that's easily better than anything they did in season 7. Possibly as good as anything they've done since like season 5. It actually had a lot of, just like the first episode, a lot of reminders of the very early days of the show as well, which, got everyone involved, got everyone watching on the bandwagon back in the day. No Ned Starks, no Robert Baratheons, but we got we got their son and daughter hooking up for one thing.
Oh, we sure did.
It was a bit of an odd one, eh?
It was a bit of an odd one, but there's, when I think about it, as awkward and we noticeably did not get any like full frontage breast of Arya, which is, I think, for everyone's sanity, was deliberate. Like, I don't think anyone out there wants to see Arya Stark's breasts. Like, it's not.
Well, that's kind of normal for the show, though, at this point. Like, it started off, Daenerys had to do a few nude scenes at the start, but that's not something that's happened. Like, the main cast members, for a show that was, branded at the start as tits and dragons, we didn't, by the time we got the dragons, we stopped getting so many tits. Like, it was, the main cast members, once the show got successful and they were all getting paid, I think everyone quickly had that written out of their contracts. It's just like the odd hooker here or there sort of thing.
Yeah, but like Arya Stark's everyone's little sister. She's like, we didn't need that. But what that did, I
thought they did it tastefully enough.
Yeah, well, what that did show, because Arya Stark was the dominating figure in that little scene. There's a lot of female empowerment. There's a lot of, like, Oh, you know Wildcard. I've been full steam ahead, driving the train of Sansa Stark. Like, for a couple of seasons now, I've just been all aboard Sansa Stark's train. She is my favourite character. Kinda. But she's the most interesting to me, I'd say that. And, like, whether it was... Because one of the most interesting scenes in episode 2 was between Sansa and Dany, and you had the power kind of play between Jon and Dany when Jon told Dany about his heritage, and then Dany's like, oh, but that makes you so-and-so. The power play scene of this episode was between Sansa and Dany about who takes over the North once this battle is done. Because Sansa's flexing her power, Dany's flexing her power, and it's two female characters pretty much making the biggest decision of the post-war world. Arya was super duper Arya in her scenes, like she was driving that situation. Then you had Mrs. Mormont, young Mormont, standing up. She wants to fight. No one's going to fuck with her. Blah, blah, blah. And you had the little girl who reminds you of Shireen with Davos. That gut-wrenching scene. She wants to fight. She doesn't want to sit and hide away. You had Gilly playing the super powerful mother figure. Like, she's looking after everyone who can't fight. She's not sitting back being a victim. She is helping everyone who cannot fight and ensuring that everyone who cannot fight is, in the best kind of situation that they can be. So I think that was a low-key theme that's been prevalent through a lot of Game of Thrones, but in this episode it was there shining, as a lot of... Oh, and then you have Brienne being a knight as well. She got knighted. I was going to
say, you forgot one.
Yeah, so it's like every female character had moments of just glory in this episode, or a power struggle, which was kind of interesting as well. To this point, we've kind of had 30 minutes of discussion here, and I feel like it's all been discussion along the same lines of episode 2. We're talking a lot of themes, we're talking a lot of character development, we're talking a lot of nitty-gritty stuff like that. So now I want to ask you, Wildcard, how do you feel about this battle? How are you feeling that it's going to play out? Like, we had a little bit of planning. We had Bran saying that he's going to lure the Night's King into the weirwood tree, and then they can fuck him up there. Well, we didn't actually see the Night's King. How are you feeling about this battle? Because I think for a lot of people, the battle is so clear-cut what's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to be anything like that. I think there's going to be a few twists and turns in terms of how the battle plays out, key aspects of the battle, the result of the battle. We know characters are going to die, that's for sure. But just how are you feeling about the battle situation and the more savagery aspect of what is to come?
Well, I'll put it this way. The first episode was 55 minutes. The second episode was 55 minutes. Both relatively long by Game of Thrones standards. Next week, which is a standalone, the battle for Winterfell, the battle for the living, it's going to be an entire episode. It was set up. They're at the gates right now. Well, within inside of it. It's set up. This is going to be, the entire episode is going to be this one massive battle. It's 80 minutes long. So there are definitely going to be some twists and turns. There is going to be a lot that happens over the course of this episode 3, and over the course of this battle. The thing, I'm prepared for. I even did like my little death stakes in the written thing. I'm prepared that a lot of these characters aren't going to make it to episode 4, and it makes sense because we've had so many moments in the first 2 episodes where there's like that reckoning moment where someone gets Just that little bit of closure, maybe not all the closure, but just enough to where it's safe for the Thrones Riders to kill them off. Although, as we know, they've had some very unexpected deaths in the past. It was kind of their thing back in the day. So I don't know that. Like, I think a lot of that is red herrings, but yeah, a little bit nervous for that. As to the overall thing of the battle, right now they can't win that battle. Like in regular combat, they're gonna have to be sneaky bastards, and I think it's pretty clear. We saw them setting up those traps, with the spikes and the moat sort of thing, and I expect there's going to be a lot of tricks with fire. Tyrion in particular has history with that. You remember the Blackwater with the wildfire or whatever it was called. So I think they've got a lot more up their sleeve than they've let on, and I know that for certain because when they were talking about tactics at the around the table there, not a single soul mentioned dragons, and we know they got 2 dragons who breathe fire, and that fire is one of the few ways you can stop these White Walker types. Pretty sure the dragons are going to be rather important, especially now that we've established that we have not 1 but 2 people who can ride those dragons. 2 dragons, sorted, done. Jon, I thought when they were talking about Bran being the lure for the Night King, I thought Jon looked a little bit shady in that situation. I'm pretty sure he's planning, I think he's been planning to sacrifice himself ever since he got resurrected back in the day. I think he's always been a little bit guilty about that. Just waiting for the right moment, knowing that there's a very significant battle to be fought. I think he's going to go head to head with the Night King if he ever gets a chance. You sort of got the brains and the brawns there. Bran being the brains, Jon being the brawn. The 2 sides of the coin going head to head with old Night King, who I'm pretty sure if we go back in the day and look at the making of him again, I'm pretty sure whether or not there's that theory that maybe Bran is actually the Night King, but I'm leaning further and further away from that. But I do think the Night King probably has Stark lineage because it would just make so much sense for where the Starks are. I think there's a little bit of a wedge going on with the Starks as well, because you had that sort of I think the symbolism of Arya and Gendry. Way back in the day, Ned was in prison. He was struggling. Robert comes and sees him and says something about how their houses were supposed to be united, because Robert was supposed to marry Lyanna Stark. Lyanna Stark instead eloped with Rhaegar. Had a son. That son's name is Jon Snow / Aegon Targaryen. There's that sort of link between the Starks and the Targaryens right there, but it was supposed to be a link between the Starks and the Baratheons. So you've got this link now between Arya and Gendry, Stark and Baratheon. I wonder if that's hinting very subtly at a bit of just a wedge between those houses again, and it's Sansa and Daenerys didn't exactly come to terms on what the North's going to do afterwards. They didn't get time to hash it out, but still. So a lot of these little things that are going to be going on under the guise of the big battle. But as far as the big battle itself, someone has to survive, right? Because there's 3 more episodes after this one.
Roger that. What percentage are you placing the Night King showing up on the battlefield?
Yeah, well, the king never leads the charge, do they? It just doesn't make any sense, because the people at the front lines are the first ones to die, pretty much, as a rule. I think he'll be there. There's that theory, because we didn't see him, that maybe he's, gone to King's Landing or something, and I just don't... the fact that we didn't see anything from Cersei and them in the last episode suggests that the showrunners are just telling us, don't worry about them for now. Focus up here, up north. This is where the action's happening. I think he turns up. I think he turns up on a dragon, presumably, and there we've got. Also, there's a thought. I'm gonna drop that idea because I've just had a much better thought. He has ridden the dragon already, hasn't he, Night's King? Didn't he ride the dragon into the wall to destroy the wall? Or am I just picturing that wrong?
He definitely did. That was one of the most climactic moments of the whole series.
Yeah, the very end of last season. So I know that's an undead dragon, but we know that John riding a dragon was very, very symbolic and a confirmation of his heritage, even if Dany inexplicably was unable to pick that up. And I still, like, I don't know whether that's done deliberately as, like, a flaw in her character to show that, like she said to Sansa, you know, she's been a little bit manipulated by her feelings for John at the moment, riding all the way up to Winterfell and such. Although I think that was a bit of an olive branch to Sansa rather than her actually admitting a weakness. But, you know, just, he rode a dragon. The Night's King rode a dragon. Does that make him a Targaryen? Somewhere down the line. Because I don't know if the zombie thing changes the whole formula, but it's pretty much been established that dragons are incredibly picky about letting anyone, sit on their backs. They basically kill everyone who tries unless you have that utmost connection with them. And maybe the resurrection is that connection. Maybe they haven't thought this far, but that's got me thinking all of a sudden. The other thing with that... Okay, yeah, fire ahead.
There is that story going back when someone who wasn't a Targaryen fed a goat to a dragon every day, and then she was able to ride it. So I think I'm not all aboard about the idea that only Targaryens can ride them being super important right now.
Well, it was with Jon, though, is the only thing, is that was meant, like, we were meant to know that this was a thing. So to have that and then to ignore it in a similar situation, like an episode later, is, I don't know, it might be a little inconsistent, but you are right, because they are, like, there are non-Targaryens who have done that deed before. The other thing with the Night King is, so he just goes, like, strolling around resurrecting the dead. How dead do you have to be to, like, they burn them and then they can't be resurrected, right? That's the whole trick with the Night's Watch. That's what they do. Even old Eddie said the same thing on the wall, like, burn the last one alive, burn the others. So on that line of thinking, like, presumably the fire, because it turns you into ash, whatever, does so much, like, does enough damage to the body that it can no longer function as a zombie, therefore they can't be revived. Like, how much does that have to, like, how much destruction has to take place before you can't be resurrected again? Because I'm just thinking, they're all sitting in the crypts, right? A lot of bodies buried in the crypts, and a lot of bodies that have been there for a long time. So I don't quite believe this theory that they're going to rise up and start fighting against the people who are trapped in there, and it's going to be like an onslaught, or an ambush. But I am interested in the functional side of this, with, like, debate exactly, like, how, I don't know if Ned's gonna wake up and start fighting without a head or whatever, because his head's somewhere down in King's Landing last I saw. But yeah, it'd be a weird one if they're forced to start fighting all the Stark, like, ancestors there. Don't quite believe it, but I see a point to it.
Well, that was kind of what I was alluding to, because
About the crypts, yeah.
I think there's a chance that the Night's King doesn't appear on the battlefield, but he does appear from within Winterfell, just to shake things up, a little curveball there.
It might be one of those ones where, like, he's got, like Bran said, he wants to kill Bran because he needs to destroy the memory of everything that went by. He's like, the world's memory, well, I got to get rid of that if I'm gonna, crush the world. We can't have people figuring out how to kill me and all this. So yeah, maybe he's just got his own plans, and the battle is almost just a front for him to get at Bran / Jon, because I think he wants Jon too, as much as Bran thinks that he's the chosen one because he got marked. He is, but I think Jon also stands alongside, and to be honest, Daenerys, because she's got dragons. Dragons kind of like fire and ice. Well, there you go. There's the ice, here's the fire.
There's the niche cast.
Yeah, what do you reckon?
We are looking forward to episode 3. It's going to be an epic.
If I chucked out right now, like, the death stakes, you pick one character who is most likely to die next episode, who are you going with?
Tormund.
Oh, don't do that to me.
Tormund is 100% going to die.
He's the last wildling, though. Or the last named one. Oh, him and Gilly, if you count her.
Ooh.
She's not quite a wildling, though. She's a Crestus child. I would go with, and I don't want to say this one either, but just like, you know in cop movies where there's the older partner, and right before the older partner gets shot and killed, there'll be a scene where he'll be like, yep, life's good. 1 more week till retirement. Then me and my wife, we're gonna go traveling around the world and do all those things we weren't able to do. Gonna live our lives, gonna happily ever after. And then that person, it's like a signal is that person is going to die in the next scene. Well, when Grey Worm had his scene with Missandei and he's like, where do you want to go after this is all over? It's like, no, don't talk about after this is over, mate, because that's the last thing you want to do. That's like instant anti-karma. And, yeah, I don't want him to go because I think that's about the most romantic partnership in the entire thing, him and Missandei. But I'm struggling to see a way that he gets through this, especially knowing that he's going to be on the front lines there. My boy Grey Worm.
Yeah, like I think maybe Tormund's being set up as someone who's likely to die because it would be interesting to see Tormund in the world after.
Yeah, right. That's a fair point too. It might be messy.
In defense of that, like I want to see that, so I'm going to say actually Jorah Mormont.
Yep. Yeah, I think he's high on that list. Well, what we were talking about last week about those, like, the previous generation of characters. And we had that thing, again, like a symbolic passing of the torch. Him and Lyanna Mormont, is that her name? Someone like that. The young Mormont girl. Where he was like, you are the future of our house. Which is implying that, in its own way, he is the past of the house. And, like we were saying last week, once you get irrelevant, once you get old, once you fall out of the picture, that's when characters get killed off. And it's as much because I think he is ready to sacrifice himself. He's been through enough. But yeah, Jorah's high on that list as well. I also am quite worried about Brienne, given that she finally just achieved her life's ambition. And yeah, what's left to push against? Well, you need those. Well, we've had this theme a few times as well on the podcast. You need that adversity to hit back against if you're gonna achieve. If you're gonna keep going. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if a Stark dies, and I don't want to guess which one. But actually, Theon is high on that list too. Yeah, but I'm still going with Grey Worm as my number one pick, my number one draft pick.
At this point, a couple of those people are sacrificial lambs.
For sure, like there's just too much set up for characters not to die, and it would be unrealistic anyway, considering what they're about to face. What about? He's mentioned Jaime before, though.
See, I don't think you're going to have Brienne and Jaime dying, and I think there's a high chance that Jaime defends Brienne. And that means that there's a high chance that Jaime dies defending Brienne. And that means that Brienne is likely to survive in that scenario and Jaime's going to die.
Definitely one or the other. Even Jon and Dany, I think it's because there's two heirs to the Iron Throne now, they can't both die, because that would be weird for the story. And I don't think this will happen necessarily now. I do think it might happen later on in the series. They're like the show is established now to a point where one of them could die.
The suspense is palpable.
Big suspense. We'll find out on Monday.
Rightio, folks. We'll be back after episode 3 to talk our way through the battle. Enjoy it. And yeah, keep it real, kia kaha. Stay away from clickbait Stephen Adams bullshit. Ciao for now.